Okay, I'm going to call this segment Blame It on Brie. Because Brie and I have been exchanging Depp v. Heard memes and stuff like that. So I finally decided, for shits and giggles, I would follow the live coverage today. I was hoping the cross-examination would start earlier, but no. Provisos. I haven't watched the entirety of the testimony. I've only seen clips. I am aware that different people react differently and deal with their trauma differently with regards to abuse. I have some knowledge of criminal law in general, having practiced it for almost 10 years. Sadly, when I moved to Ontario, I had to also practice family, so I'm aware of the domestic ire that often follows a couple after separation. I've been on some very big cases, and I've been on smaller cases. I have defended men who have been accused of assault, and men who have in fact been assaulted by their female spouses. And I have defended and represented women who've been assaulted by their male spouses. In terms of bias, Johnny versus Amber, I am very envious of Amber's beauty and her career and her ability to have gone into the industry and not be prohibited when she was a starlet, as opposed to an old hag like me now, but that's really neither here nor there. Johnny Depp, I mean, I haven't disliked. I would say I like him more than dislike him, but I mean, if I had to pick someone I like better, it would be Johnny, but that doesn't tend to affect how I feel people perform in court, because I've seen many people I love completely choke in court, and that happens. Okay. I have also myself been a victim of domestic violence and at the hands of a drug addict. So I am familiar with someone who's kind of watching that happening and unable to stop it, and empathetic towards drug addicts, because I have also represented those in court. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly stream of consciousness via my notes, talk about what I thought of today's proceedings. I should also, I have this note, past recollection recorded versus the refreshed recollection in the present. Amber Heard mentioned some diaries. And of course, sometimes, talking, I wrote it down at the time, can bolster credibility, that something may have happened, but it's not always the case, because I was involved in a few cases where the diary entries themselves were pretty much bullshit. Same with confessions and stuff like that. So it's interesting that essentially Amber's legal representation kind of under the bus a bit, because as she said, she gave everything, but isn't in charge of who got what. So there's kind of a subtle implication there that, and she said, I'm not in control of it. So whether or not it turns out that the lawyers on her side actually hid something, that's going to be pretty bad if they did. If they didn't hide anything, they can't really say. It's hard. They can't address it really well, because then it's kind of like, we need to talk about what she did give us, and then you might, stab her in the face by accident if it turns out she didn't give you something. Anyway, in terms of all the objections, so of course there were all those memes about Amber's lawyers and stuff objecting to their own question. As has been pointed out by Devin Stone of Legal, when you're in trial, you're on your feet, and like things are going lightning speed. They feel really, really fast. And even though you prepare, you have your list of questions based on all of the evidence you've had in front of you. There will be some times where something comes out of someone's mouth and it's like, what the fuck was that? Or it comes out in a way that you don't really expect. And you know, okay, I can follow this and I can get to another point, but you kind of ask it in a way that there's a chance that the answer could be hearsay. But there's also a chance that it could be properly answered. And it's always better to object to something and be wrong than to not object and have something go in that completely kicks your ass later. So in that particular case, Amber's lawyer asked a question, the answer came back as hearsay, and he objected to the hearsay answer. So not his own question per se. A more seasoned lawyer may have been able to kind of formulate that in their head beforehand so the question was very, very clear. But again, that's really hard. There's a reason why it's really hard to get law society sanctions against a trial lawyer, because you're basically thinking on your feet. So I have not personally done a jury trial, and probably if I were still practicing law, assuming it was before I quit, 10 years in, I don't know if I would have been lead on a trial like this, so I'm going to assume that I would still be a junior. I remember running around with all those binders and being like, oh, well, here's, and in some transcripts, actually, it's funny because they'll be like, Miss Lee, where is this? Oh, tab B, my lord. And, that's where I show up. I would point out to my senior that there were points in the latter part of her direct when she was asked about certain things that she would look to either one juror or like a couple of them, and before she answered, she'd be looking at them like this, and then it'd be like, because I would want to know what's going on in those jurors' heads. You can argue that that's extremely manipulative. That's usually my first instinct. At the same time, the jury is really the entity you're supposed to be talking to, although it seems a lot more natural to talk to the person who's actually talking to you. So she knows that the jury is her audience. That could be read as something kind of untowards, in my opinion. The makeup thing is interesting because I remember when she was showing the scratches, like I have a cat and he does this shit to me all the time. And I think they said she was at an appearance a month or so after she's alleged she got those injuries, but they're still looking fresh. And she said, well, that's all makeup. And I was kind of like, well, either you suck at the makeup or you use the wrong makeup, or you're not covering it up. Not that, people who have been victimized should feel the need to cover up anything, but it's just something to know, because later on she talks about feeling like her nose had been broken, and you see the nose is pristine. So how come, in my view, the makeup on her nose is so perfect, but you can't do the arms? If anything, I find maybe body makeup, depending on like where you sweat more, would probably stick a bit more to the arm skin than, like, at least my T-zone's fucked, so that would just be like, psh. Okay. I thought it was very odd that she was so happy when she was reminiscing about the good times. Like, if I look back on all the times with the abusive ex, there were obviously times when I didn't wish he was dead. And we did have good times, but when I talk about them, it's usually not with that kind of almost sense of longing, because it was a negative time, and it was those times almost feel worse because he would turn around and be the way he was. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. My personal instinct is to go, that's a little like dramatic. But at the same time, I mean, maybe she's someone who does relive things quite vividly. I mean, as she's testifying, she appears to be emotional, emotional. At first blush, I would say, yeah, you know, she's putting on an act, but at the same time, not all victims of abuse are going to come across super credibly, because they could be very nervous, and they could be very emotional. Like, I know people who are, say, maybe having a panic attack, and so they'll have the like, but they won't actually be crying. See, I'm so like, you know, it's all gray, but whatever. So another thing that's been brought up to me is, why doesn't he look at her? Now, yeah, at first blush, when you look at that, you're kind of like, oh, you know, he's guilty. He can't look her in the eye. While that's an inference you can make, the other possibility is, I don't want to look at your face because I fucking hate you. And then in a case like this, if you are alleged to be the aggressor, you might be worried that appearing like you're staring down your victimized ex will look like you are intimidating her. So for all we know, he could have had a conversation with his lawyers, and if he's like me, it's really hard to keep your face in control, you know, like, and they said, just do your drawings and don't react, because we want like net zero emotion coming from you. It is weird because she does stare him down too, and then in the courtroom before, I think she was staring him down, which brings me to the whole thing where she was really jumpy. I know what it's like to be that scared of someone. I think though, after this is your second defamation rodeo, and you are in a courtroom full of people, and there are bailiffs there, and if he tried to hit you, you will pretty much have won. And he would, you know, be on trial for assault afterwards. So I find it very odd that she would have such a visceral reaction, especially when you look at how she's been glaring at him and stuff like that. So that, to me, seemed a little insincere. Oh yeah, so the anchors of Court TV. I remember watching OJ, and I remember my discussions of the OJ trial. Oh my God, I got so much hate, because trials, I've always said, are not about the truth. They're about what you can prove is the truth. And that's not always going to get you justice. But the anchors, it's like watching Inside Edition. It's like, Heard and Depp trial coming right back. And it's kind of like, this is what we're reduced to. Like, I can see law nerds like me going, okay, yeah, well, I wonder what kind of objections they're going to make and what kind of evidentiary basis they're making their cases on. But people watching this, like, these are people's lives. So even though I understand why people don't believe Amber Heard, I think going on a rampage is not going to help either. Let's see. Yeah, so back to Johnny Depp, so not reacting. But there are some times that he does react. So then you're kind of like, is the rest of it a show, or how come you're not reacting to everything? So for example, about Johnny Depp, when she says he would put cigarettes out on himself and then later on his face, and he was kind of shaking his head. So then you could argue, well, was the rest of it for show as well? Like, why would you shake your head at that but not shake your head to some of the other allegations? I mean, you could always argue he was in a drug-induced coma, but that wouldn't really help him either. Okay. So she's talking about how the countersuits made her relive a lot of these things, and not to sound like a complete bitch, which I am, but it's kind of a sad fact of life. When you're dealing with the legal system, if you make allegations, the other side has a right to put you through hell to make sure that your version stays true and internally logical and all that kind of stuff. Just as her lawyers can do that to Johnny, his lawyers can cross-examine her about her stuff, which brings us to the really fun part, which is the cross-examination. I started to actually screen capture this with my expressions, and then I was like, oh my God, this is the most boring shit ever for people. How about you look at my face compared to beautiful Amber Heard's for 8 hours? No, fuck you. So, so there's a thing about her having when he was on her back, and then she wore a backless dress that same night. And the question was, did you like look to see if your back showed injuries before the Met Gala? And she was a Met anyway, whatever they went to that I'll never be part of. And she disagreed, and she's like, no, I only did that after. I don't know why that's something that she couldn't agree to, because apparently they even have her in testimony. Like, you got to pick your battles when you disagree with what somebody says you said. You know, even take the opportunity to check the transcript. Did I say that? Okay. Because the last thing you want to do is go, oh, and what she ended up doing is, you misunderstood me. No. Yeah, you know, like that's one part's in writing, and now you're saying something else. And, you know, when you read that on paper again, it looks like you're wavering. So, okay, so the other part about another look she gave to the jury that I did not appreciate personally, talking about when she was raped with the bottle, allegedly, and said she'd been bleeding from the vagina. Before she actually answered that, she looked again to the jury member that seems to be focusing on, and it's like, if I remember correctly, it was kind of like they're asking me this again, and you know, I'm kind of like, I would definitely have brought that up to my senior and been like, somebody needs to keep an eye on this jury member and see if, you know, he's goo-goo-eyeing over her, or, you know, just as a matter of, you know, tactics. The strategy of using a female to cross-examine. This was brought up by one of the anchors later. Absolutely. I think it's funny that it's this Camille person, because there's all that speculation that they're flirting. But anyway, absolutely the right strategy. I know a lot of times when I felt very strongly about a male accused, especially when I thought he was innocent, because, you know, we can go into that another time about what you do when they're guilty, but having a woman represent you does kind of imply that, you know, there's at least one woman who believes you. Of course, you know, if you did beat up another woman, it doesn't matter, but optics can be very important. Now, when she was looking at the medical record when she saw it, I think she went to Dr. Kipper's office, and she asked about potential concussion, and they talked about the state of her skin and stuff, right? And I think, I mean, of course, Depp's lawyers are basically saying they didn't talk about the injuries implication because they didn't happen. And she said, I think the medical record is missing a lot of things. That's a tough hill to climb, because it's not like they left that section out. They just, like, I would think, you know, if you came into the doctor's office and you're complaining about a concussion and your arm is dangling off your shoulder because it's like dislocated, they would make some kind of note. And then she said, well, it was a male nurse. I don't know what you're trying to imply, like he just didn't believe you. I think there's only so far you can carry that woman-hating, homophobic card, and you have to be very careful when you do it, because you don't want to look like you think everybody is necessarily homophobic and women-hating. Donation versus pledge. They argued a lot about this, and it was just a stupid semantic war. And this is on both sides. Amber says that she uses donate and pledge synonymously, because Camille was trying to say, well, you may pledge it, but you didn't donate it. And it was like, no, I absolutely do not agree. okay, the jury, unless they're like, you know, the Hicks from Simpsons, okay, they're going to see that you're playing word games. So I think at some point, just saying, okay, yeah, well, I meant this. So yeah, when I say donate, I meant this. And then, you know, biting the bullet. Yes, I did say I donated it. Because I pledged it, and in my mind that's the same. Sounds, even though it sounds stupid, sounds a little less stupid than, no, they are the same, let me teach you English. Now, on Camille's part, I think she totally beat that like an undead rabid horse, because she could have easily said, okay, you said pledge, you didn't say pledge, you actually said donate, yes or no. Whether or not you use them synonymously, you said donated, not pledged, correct? Yes or no? And then, okay, you said donated, but the actual money had not physically made it to the bank account yet. A couple of questions, like, because they just spent a lot of time on it, and I didn't think it was a highly effective transaction. But I mean, Amber was truthful about Elon's portion, and it was very smart of her to then say, yeah, and it did not contribute to my part of the pledge, because now she's, you know, whenever you say something that is not completely self-serving, you know, it gives you some credibility, like with Johnny Depp's was it former employee? It's like, oh no, he gave me a shit ton more than that. You know, it's kind of like, okay, so he's not going to lie about the amount. So that's good. I have not watched the entirety of Johnny Depp's cross-examination, but I understand he might be called again. And then just kind of based off of what I've seen, I think I've said to Brie that as charming as he is, and you know, especially when he's kind of playing with the bantering like that, it's very different when you're in a courtroom. There are times when I thought, you know, his little smirks, like they were, I think in normal conversation, if you're having like a debate over dinner, okay, that's very cute. In a courtroom, it makes you look like you're either not taking it seriously, or you have such little disregard for either the other person or this whole concept of being guilty of something that, you know, you're like, yeah, whatever. I think in general he came off very well though, because he was very measured. But again, right, I haven't seen the entirety, and that's a heck of a lot longer than I expected to drone on for. So, my 2 cents.